Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate being here. So I guess, what's a zoo guy doing here? And luckily I got to follow Ken because he's kind of a zoo guy too. So he already set the stage. And I came in late to Ken's stuff, but I think it's gonna be kind of a nice transition from one to the other. But, I think our jobs are so much in common. I think the people that come here deal so much with companion animals and training people how to train and better the lives of their animals. And my animals just happen to be all in one facility. And the people that I help to train are employees. They come and go. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the challenges, a little bit about the similarities between us. But Bill Nye says, everyone you will ever meet knows something you don't. It's something I live by. The elephant community, I'm an animal guy, but everyone that knows me knows that my passion is really with elephants. And the elephant community in zoos is interesting, to say the least. It's very diverse. It has a lot of different opinions, and I truly believe that, regardless of that, we can learn something from everyone we ever meet. And that's something I stand true to. So I really believe that training is training, whether it's a dog, a horse, a goat, an elephant, or even a fish. And I'm going to start off with some stuff that our aquarium team does at the zoo, which is really pretty cool. The one thing is, the difference is that building a relationship is so important to us, just like it is for everybody in this room. But even though they're not our pets, and even though we leave at night, and they might come and go from the zoo, building a relationship is the foundation for our success in moving forward. We spend so much time trying to get the groundwork laid and the foundation with these animals, the trust bank built so that we can have success moving forward. So I talked about the aquarium team, and I don't know a lot about fish. I love to fish, but I don't know a lot about fish. And one of the challenges they had is a lot of the tanks in the aquarium have multiple species. Some have turtles, some have multiple species of fish. And this was an arowana, which they told me needs to eat on the surface of the water. And so I'm going to backtrack for just a second. So our zoo, besides the fact that I'm the curator of large mammals, everything big, I also lead a team of curators that helps to train across the zoo. We meet regularly, we discuss challenges, we help people try to be more successful in taking care of their animals and overcoming training challenges. So anyways, this came to one of the training meetings, and she says, arowana needs to feed on the top of the water. I guess it has to affect their eyes and whatnot because their mouths are shaped to eat off the top. The food they feed sinks pretty rapidly. Other animals come and steal it. Stuff like that happens. So we had to come up with a way to make this reinforcing for the animal to hang out with us and to try to get it fed. So these guys did a pretty good job. So she hand feeds the other animals, and you see this arowana is right at the bottom of the screen. Half the time doesn't even care to eat anymore. But as soon as they start, this fish comes, and she's built a pretty good relationship with everyone on the team. And you'll see she eats here and there. But the fact now, we actually weigh this fish, we monitor this fish. She swims into a sleeve so we can move her from a tank to get weighed. It's really cool stuff. And it all started with just some relationship building. This fish doesn't go after the other food that's broadcast through the tank. And like I said, just kind of hangs out. The team touches her. Who would have thought it's a fish? I didn't think. But when we had this discussion and started talking about relationship building with the animals, the looks in the group were pretty like, well, hold on, you want me to relationship build with a fish? And so once some people started seeing this, hey, if we can do it with a fish, think of the good stuff we can do with some of the other animals. So animals we get in, they come from all different places. Some of them come from big places, small parks, big things. But anyways, everything's a little bit different. So how we build relationship varies from animal to animal. The top video that you're going to see, and it's a video, even though there's not a whole lot going on in it, is our lead keeper, Kathy, trying to get a tiger, an adult female tiger, comfortable being in a new surrounding. So we have a tiger that's born in another facility. The SSP is the species survival plan. They tell us, they manage genetics and tell us which animals should breed with who. And this SSP says, you know what, it would be great if this tiger moved to Houston to breed with what you guys have. So now we bring this tiger in, we've moved it from the state of Washington all the way down to the state of Texas in a crate, let it out, new surroundings, everything's new. You can imagine what must be going on. So all we do is sit, we put a tarp up to keep it kind of dark, put a staff in front of it, and as long as they're not acting aggressive or really overly stressed, this cat was pretty shy. He just kind of sat in the back, vocalized here and there. But if he did anything, made eye contact, did things that for a tiger are okay, that we thought was positive interaction, we'd reinforce it with food. And that's all Kathy's doing, sitting there. And within about a day and a half, he's eating from a meat stick. Yep. I mean, look at him. He's not comfortable. There's no doubt. But a day and a half, we got a cat that just moved from one facility to another that was actually not hand raised, but parent raised at the previous facility, coming in and just spending time, relationship building. And I just can't stress enough, the foundation for all of us is patience and building a relationship. So the aquarium team, we have a huge quarantine facility for a lot of our aquarium stuff. And it would be a great place to start a lot of training. But the aquarium team just recently got on board once that arowana came on and they realized that they could do stuff with it, that, hey, maybe we should start training stuff. So we got in a bunch of small rays, put them in a huge tank, and this is obviously someone diving it. And what they want to do, as soon as they feed, the big rays come and they smother the small rays. So what they started to do is they started to introduce that terracotta plate as a visual cue that said, hey, this is time and this is the place to eat. And so this is very early on stages of these little rays coming to hand feed from this caregiver. So these guys started to come up with their own solutions. Hey, maybe we could try this. They come to the meetings and say, hey, maybe we could try doing this. And the team would say, you know what, why don't you, the hopes was they could put this terracotta tray down, the rays are gonna see it and say, oh, this is where we eat. So that worked for a while. And we're gonna run into the challenge that we had with that in a little bit. So the biggest thing for us, like I said, is that foundational training. Where we run into it is that, or where we run into some other challenges is that there's lots of people with lots of different backgrounds, lots of different ideas. I'm sure every person here that consults and helps somebody train a companion animal has that same thing. Every house you go to, every person you work with has their own ideas, their own background. And the zoo world is no different. Sometimes they're probably a little more stronger opinions. But the good thing is that the zoo community is so large, but it's a fairly tight-knit group of people. The history of animals is usually very well documented, and the answers aren't more than a phone call or text away. Because for us, it's important to know, hey, did this come from a big zoo, from a safari park? Was it wild-born? Was it captive-born? Was it mother-reared? Was it hand-reared? Is it used to being in front of guests? Is it used to being out in a 100-acre field, and now we're going to put it in a 100 by 100 pen with thousands and thousands of guests staring at it? So that background's very important for us to know, I'm sure, just like everybody else here. So while I said the similarities is the relationship building, one of our challenges is also relationship building. My team goes home at the end of the day. They don't have the luxury of spending nights with the animals unless there's an emergency or there's something that they really have to do. They have vacations, they have other priorities, they have strings of animals, some hundreds of other animals that they have to take care of. So the relationship building, while it's a similarity, is a huge challenge for us. We do get attached. There is ownership issues that we run into, but it is still a job. And one of the challenges we have is that sometimes you'll get one keeper with a specific animal, and that is the only person that can do certain things. If that was my dog at home, there'd be no problem with that. But what happens when that person goes on vacation? What happens if that person gets another job and we're stuck with someone that has built such a strong relationship with one animal with one person that we got to start all over again? So it's really a goal of ours to make sure that we spread out and that everybody can do everything with all the animals. Granted, it doesn't start that way, but that is definitely an end goal we have. Staff turnover, it's not big for us at Houston, but it definitely affects scheduling and time commitments. And we really have to fit all this in to an 8-ish hour day. Large groups, schools, or herds, these animals aren't in our backyards or not sometimes in a small pen. So competing with herd mates for attention can be a challenge. And as I'm reading this, I guess as I think of large groups, schools, or herds of people are also a challenge because sometimes they're closer than we are interacting with the animals as we're trying to. So, most animals are hardwired with a fight or flight response. They can be somewhat cautious around people, sometimes other species. We try to do mixed species stuff as much as we can. So it's even harder to build a relationship when we're trying to compete with herd mates. I mean, what's more reinforcing, a total stranger or something else in the herd? So this is one of the challenges we work with. So as I said earlier, they put that terracotta plate in to get the rays to come to it. And what they found out is these adults would come over top of them and just totally smother them. And again, I don't know a lot about them, but apparently they kind of suck the food in, and they would literally suck the food right out of the little ones' mouths and out of the tray. So we had to go to plan B, and this comes in. And so here, we decided to deliver it through the end of PVC pipes. And this way the team didn't even have to dive with them. So this one has a gray bottom on the end. You can see the gray tip on the bottom. And this is where the adult rays went to. And you see the white one is coming on the top, and that one's gonna make its way to the other side. And so now that adult ray is feeding on the bottom of that tube. Team no longer has to dive. Every time we dive, it takes multiple people because we need spotters, we need have safety protocols we follow. Now they're doing it from the top. And that person that was once spotting is now out talking to the guests in front and trying to convey our message about the animals in that tank. So it's a pretty cool thing. And again, this is all team driven. These guys, that Arowana set the stage for our aquarium team to start being really creative to figure out new ways to solve challenges. Proximity to the animals can be a challenge. I'm not just going to walk up and pet the tigers or the lions or the gorillas. So again, large exhibits. It's a goal for us as a zoo to have large naturalistic exhibits. We want animals to, one, exhibit natural behaviors. So we try to simulate exhibits to have a terrain and an environment like they would in the wild as best we could. We want our guests to be appreciative of what they're looking at and have an appreciation for where these animals come from. But as a caregiver, it's challenging because these big exhibits, one, I gotta now be more reinforcing for them to come off exhibit, and I gotta see them. Sometimes we make exhibits so big and lush that the animals they hide, and that's what they do. That's what they're hardwired to do. So that's a challenge. And then almost everything in the zoo we train is protected contact, means we don't share the same space with it. So we don't go in, we don't leash them, we don't do anything like that. It's all from outside of a barrier, which presents other types of challenges for us as well. So one of the things we do is we train recalls, and different kinds of recalls. Emergency recalls, which I'll talk at the end, but this is a recall just to get these red river hogs in from exhibit. And we started training this, and we do it any time of day. The audio cue, unfortunately, the person's in a glass, we're in a glass room where the guests are watching, and then this is on exhibit. Everything you see that's brown is where the red river hogs live. The green stuff is our lowland gorillas, and they can come and go. The gorillas can come in, but the hogs can't get out, because if the hogs could get out, it would look brown too, because they'd eat everything in sight. So once we established this mixed species exhibit, we had to come up with a way to make sure that animals reliably shift off exhibit for any emergency, but also we need to clean. So you can't hear the audio cue, but there is no doubt when that audio cue happens by the reaction of these hogs. And this is not an emergency recall. This is an everyday come in your barn recall. We vary what happens next. So when they come in the barn, they get something. They might come in for 5 minutes. They might come in for 3 hours. They might come in overnight. It doesn't matter. They might go right back out. And this I laugh because this video is not sped up. Their little legs move that fast. They're super cute. So these are some of the things we do with all of our animals. We try to have some sort of recall just so we can get them shifted, so we can clean, so we can take care of them. A big challenge is tours and VIP and guest priorities. People want to see animals. That's why they come to the zoo. We have our development team bring donors, people that we expect or hope to schmooze enough to open their pocketbooks to help support our cause. And what better way to get someone jazzed than put them right next to a pretty cool animal? So how do we have this, how do we still set up positive interactions for our guests and still maintain proper response from the animal? So the video I'm going to show you is not at Houston, and it's something that was taken offline, and I know the people fairly well that did this. And it shows you some of the struggle. It's a huge VIP event, and I don't know what's exactly going on, but you'll recognize if you're into car racing at all, it's Tony Stewart. He's the professional race car driver, and just this entourage of camera people everywhere. And so here you are trying to schmooze, and the first thing this elephant does is shows a little bit. That's definitely unwanted behavior. How do you proceed with all these people here now to keep moving forward? Sure, there's definitely ways you can do it. And this video is cut short, but there's other incidences that happen throughout this. And the biggest thing for me is the communication we have with our development team, with our zoo leadership that says, you know, we're gonna have to redirect this a little bit. And they set the stage before people ever come down. Because if this happens with a baby, or if it happens with, you know, one of the cuter animals, we set up this expectation so they don't get disappointed. Oh, I don't get to touch the baby today. That's okay, because we understand. But this is a big challenge for us, is trying to be reinforcing, trying to set up our expectations, but still trying to appease and please people that really don't understand all that's happening. All they want to do is see something cool. So being on show also means tons of distractions from the environment as well as herd mates. The picture that's in here is at the time was a 4-year-old female Asian elephant, and this newborn baby was probably about a week old. Well, you would think it's hers. She fell in love with it. She tried to nurse it. She followed it all over. And so getting her to start getting back and be compliant with stuff was a challenge, because we were certainly not more reinforcing than a new baby sister. So we do a lot of A to B stuff in the zoo for exercise, for movement, trying to get animals the activity and exercise that a lot of them need. So this video shows a lioness going A to B stuff. She gives the cue, the lion goes pretty good to somebody that's going to receive her. What happens at the end and how she's reinforced, there's definitely things that can be fine-tuned, because this lion, her attitude is she's pretty high-strung. But that stuff we can work out. The point of this is she's doing A to B, she's getting some exercise, some movement, and we send her. This time it's a little slower. There's a lot going on, but it's a pretty good response for this cat. Same behavior, same reaction. And we'll do this sometimes with animals. It's usually a duration thing. We try to do it 15, 20 minutes just to try to get them moving, especially if they're pregnant or whatever. So already, things in her environment are starting to be more reinforcing than we are. And the funny thing is, if there was audio, is the keeper right there says, uh-oh, and ducks. Because the person filming is also one of her caregivers. And now we get to stare all the way back. So a challenge for us is trying to be reinforcing than what's going on. We got birds, we got squirrels, we got kids running, we got cotton candy, you name it. There's a lot of things that could be a lot more reinforcing than me and a meatball. We also try to be very proactive with training. We establish goals right from the get-go with all the animals. Okay, so we know a zoo goal is animals have to be out by 9. They need to be on show by 9 o'clock in the morning. So what do we need to do to be successful so we can have them out by 9 when the zoo opens? That means we got to get shifting routines down and get them conditioned to move where we want them to move. We know that if we want to have a good breeding group, maybe we need X amount of animals together in the same herd or the same group because it promotes better natural behaviors and promotes better propagation. So how do we introduce animals back and forth? And all this stuff is great. And we almost always train animals to go into crates for one reason or another. But this is where we get the hiccups. So this is a cassowary, probably one of the most dangerous birds, if not most dangerous animals in the zoo. They've got humongous claws, feet that can eviscerate you. And this animal's getting ready to leave the zoo. And so every day for a while, we trained her to go into her crate. And it sure beats wrestling her and using bang boards and pushing her into the crate. And I don't think there's probably I don't think there's a calmer response, for an animal shifting into a crate. She's like, yeah, okay, this is cool. And the day we loaded her, we closed the door on a regular basis and do all this stuff with her, and it made her transfer to another zoo a whole lot less stressful for the bird, a whole lot less stressful for the team, because you kind of pucker up going in there when you got this bird that knows you can eviscerate you with those feet. Even a big guy like me can be a little afraid of a bird. So great plans don't always work the way we want. I can't tell how many times we've worked on crate training, we've worked on desensitizing animals to blood draw, to ultrasounds, to whatever, and then something comes up. An animal gets sick, a herd mate gets sick, something happens that really throws a monkey wrench into all our plans. But the good thing is, generally, right from the get-go, we try to have really, like I said, I can't stress enough the foundational work. So this cat that we're going to see here is a jaguar that has to move exhibits. There was actually, there's a long story behind it, but it has to move exhibits, and it has to move within a pretty short window. She was never trained to go in the crate, but she has a pretty good relationship with the team. She's never seen even this crate, and Jags have such an amazing sense of smell that sometimes that can be a detractor to getting them in. And here, on cue, she comes in, and we think we're good. She says you can start closing the door. She turns around for a second because the door starts moving. They stop, they call her back, and then they're able to close the door and move around. This is a cat that was never even trained to go in a crate. The foundational training, the relationship building, and anyone, I normally do zoo talks, anyone that's ever worked with a jaguar will tell you, they're pretty, they can be very suspicious animals. They're not often the most confident animal with new situations like this, like some other species of carnivores are. So our philosophy and expectations at the zoo, it's a very introductory to animal training for everybody at the zoo. I mean, very basic. We don't get into the weeds much at all to start with. Our goal is that everyone speaks the same language, both to each other and to the animals. We want to be able to have that same conversation across the board. There's mandatory reading. There's a test, and granted, it's a very easy test, but nonetheless, there's a test. We just want people to understand the bare bone basics, and then from there, we start to get a little more in depth with things. So, this is an elephant that bangs on the door. We just filmed this the other day just for this talk. He bangs on the door, and you let him in, he bangs on the door. You put him in a stall, he bangs on the door. You put him in a stall without a door, he bangs on something else. So one of our challenges was, one, why? And then we realized, if you watch his trunk, he actually feels the vibrations. First thing, he bangs on the door, and then his nose goes down and feels the vibrations. And we started looking at everything. Every door, it's the same location, not the same location on every door, but if door A, it's always the same spot on door A. Door B, it's always the same spot on door B. It is so shiny, it's like looking in a mirror. Because when he does it, he then feels the vibrations. We had no idea how reinforcing that was to him. And it affected a lot of things that we wanted to do and some expectations for us. But those kinds of things are things that we want our team to be more cognizant of. So many years ago, I read Gene Donaldson's books, Culture Clash and Dogs Are from Neptune, I think it was. And as I was going through and I saw the term open bar, and I thought, yes, please, open bar sounds good to me. And when I read it, and one, I was disappointed, it didn't mean we were going to the bar, but it started to make me think about things a little differently. And the way, and I referenced Gene in here, but the way we move to open bar and the way we talk about open bar at the Houston Zoo is totally different. I know Gene uses it for desensitizing and counter conditioning, and we don't. We use it for training everyday stuff. We use it as you do what we want, you get free food, and that's pretty much the basis of it. I understand continuous reinforcement creates mediocrity. I get all that. I can tell you without this method, I lie. The method that we use has proven extremely successful for me. We have an extremely successful program with the elephants at the Houston Zoo, probably one of the most resilient and compliant herds maybe in the country. The rest of the zoo, Houston Zoo field zoo is getting a lot of success with this. And so by this, all I mean is if I'm talking about an elephant, so an elephant, a lot of my references are elephants. So if we're drawing blood on an elephant, we tell them lean in, which means they're gonna line up at the bars in front of us. Their head's here, their back legs here, and they lean in sideways. If they're in this position with their ear out, we tell them lean in, ear, they get free food. They get one piece of food in their trunk. If their ear moves in, if they shift weight to their other foot, if their butt moves out, all my staff does is stop the food, and we can get into LRSs and all that stuff. I don't even go this way with my team. I speak on very simple terms with them. All I want you to do is stop feeding. Almost immediately, we got 10 elephants, one that's as young as born on Father's Day of this year. Almost immediately, they come right back in, and we start paying them again. Very small bits of food. And that has been extremely successful for us, and it has been very successful for our herd to grow into this program. I put chumming up here because I said I like to fish. I'm a fisherman. When we go offshore fishing and we chum, we dump a bunch of food in the water and it attracts fish, and that's how we catch them. So we jokingly say that around the zoo because we want people to focus on, if you're given food, it needs a reason. It needs to be communicating something to the animal. So we don't want you to chum, and we get into that where people just kind of will start to feed faster than they really need to, and they stop paying attention to why they're paying the food, and they just kind of get in the zone. They start chumming, and the team always says, you're chumming, and it makes them refocus on that. I've had people argue with me that all we're doing is distracting the animals. I couldn't argue with that more. Have we used it as a distraction? Absolutely. Yeah, there's times where we have to get vaccines in or we have to give a shot into something, and the training it's not a priority right now. We do use it as a distraction. But when we talk about training and moving forward with our training program at the zoo, we have had tremendous success with it. So the top video that's about to play is a Fusa getting laser acupuncture. A Fusa is a small cat, carnivore. And as long as she stays leaned in under that platform, she gets free food. If her body changed, if her attitude changed, sometimes it's as subtle as her ears going back or her eyes getting big, the food stops. It's pretty simple. Does she know what's going on back there? Absolutely, she does. Are we distracting her? Maybe, but we have tremendous success getting acupuncture on this animal 4 or 5 times a week. Tiger on the bottom. You can do that back there. The tiger on the bottom is getting injections. It just got an injection. So it gets milk sprayed in its mouth, and then when it gets the injection, it gets a meatball, or several small meatballs, very small meatballs. And you'll see she needs 2 shots here, 2 injections. So she's here, she's like, wait a minute. Okay. So are we distracting her? Maybe we're giving her something else to think about. But she certainly knows she's about to get a shot in the butt. There's no doubt about it. Does she need the milk? I don't think she needs the milk. Does it make my team happy and feel like they're going to be more successful? Sure. So sometimes we manage the people that are managing the animals the same way we manage the animals. We got to do whatever we need to do to be successful. Body language, I talked about shifting, as much as I said when you have an elephant leaned in and we stop feeding, for me, so much, born and raised in Buffalo, New York, I'm a New Yorker, I talk with my hands, I can be very animated, and without even knowing it, if I change my body posture to being on my heel, the animal knows it ain't gonna get reinforced. And 99% of the time, if I'm training an elephant to do whatever, or a cat, or a gorilla, and my body language says this, they automatically go back to what they're gonna do to increase their likelihood for reinforcement. So we do talk a lot about body language. We think that 90-some% of our body language, 93% of human-to-human communication is nonverbal. 55% is our body language, 38% is tone of voice. That's a pretty big deal. These are people that understand the same language, that rely only on, 7% of actually the content coming out of your mouth. I mean, think about it if you met someone that doesn't speak English. So much of it is the tone that comes out of your voice and what your body is saying. If I ask for directions to someone that doesn't know how to speak English in this body language, they're going to be a little taken back by it. So our animals are the same way. So we really stress a lot how much body language means. So product versus process. Have this discussion a lot too. For us at the zoo, the product is more important than the process, sort of. We talk about welfare, animal safety, human safety as a group. We don't put them in an order because they're all very important. Obviously, we like to say keeper safety is first, but we came here, we put the animals in our care, we got to do everything we can to make sure we do what's right for them. So for me, as long as that is our guiding principle, the process is not as important. If these are the guiding principles we go on. So by that I mean, always growing up, we had dogs. And they were always such well-trained dogs. I remember vividly this little border collie that we had, and it came and left the house on its own. We actually had a spring-loaded sliding door, and she'd open it, and it would close behind her, and she'd come back. And we didn't have a fenced-in yard. We lived in the city, but it was a big yard, but it wasn't a farm. We had neighbors on all sides of us. The dog never left the yard. I remember going, we'd all leave as a kid. We'd get in the car and leave, and we'd come home, and the dog would be sitting in the driveway. When I think back at it now, I'm like, oh my God, that's so crazy. I would never think of doing that. But we did that. And my dog, I remember, he would sit, he knew all kinds of goofy tricks that my dad would teach him to sit up, and he'd wave, and he'd bow, and roll over, and do all this stuff. And they were always really well-trained dogs. Did my dad know the process? Did he know the theory behind it? He was a pretty smart guy, but if I were to bet, no way could he tell me that, this happened because of this, or no way. So for us, that was a pretty cool product without knowing the process. I'm not saying the process isn't important. For me, we focus on the product, and then we start to push the process for people and try to get them to understand why the tiger stays through 2 injections that, after the first one looked like it might have been a little uncomfortable. That's how we push it. We do have groups at the zoo that care more about the process than the product. I take that back. It seems like they care more about the process than the product. They definitely care a lot about the process, and it stalls success of the product. Oh, we have to do it this way. This is the way it works. So we have to find that happy medium, and that goes back to the different people and the different backgrounds. But for the basis of it, my point is we don't push it, and we ease people into the process. So why do we do it? I mean, training's been the focus at the zoo for many years. Training's been the focus in animals and human care. You know, when you think about it, when I was a kid, it was sea lions and it was elephants primarily, or marine mammals, not just sea lions, but it was marine mammals and elephants primarily that you saw shows at a zoo with. In the last 20 years or so, that has really expanded into every species in the zoo. Like I said, who would have thought fish? We would be talking about training fish. And then again, while these are wild animals, in many instances we want to keep them wild, whether it's for herd structure, for breeding. Our goal is still to provide relatively stress-free life for all the animals in our care, and training is the foundation for hopefully doing that. Managing stress, improving welfare. It's definitely our job to create best living conditions. You know, they didn't ask to be here, but now that they're here, we need to do what we can to make sure we can properly feed them, properly medicate them, and properly breed them. And again, training, first step to minimizing stress and aggression. Aggression towards us, aggression towards other animals. So why? You know, we try to train for stress-free environments. Some animals may want to stay in large groups. I talked about needing to be reinforcing enough that animals want to leave their exhibit. I need to be more reinforcing than this. Good luck. And we need to separate them for a whole lot of reasons. You know, we need to monitor food intake and output. Sometimes we need to prevent breeding because they're too old or too young, because they're related, because whatever. So there's a lot of reasons that we might have to manage the day-to-day herd structure or the animal relations with each other. A lot of animals in human care can get herd bound, meaning they get so attached to the animal, their cage mate, herd mate, whatever, that you can't separate them. Elephants are notorious for, years ago at least especially, that if they live in a group and you try to take one out, and oh my goodness, you'd think you were shipping them away, even if they could see each other and smell each other. So getting animals comfortable leaving and not being so herd bound is a goal that we try for all of them. We want animals to be comfortable coming and going, shifting back and forth to try to reduce stress. We jokingly say at Houston that we habituate the elephants to so much stuff that when that big hurricane comes by and blows the roof off the building, we want them to look at each other and say, "Ha, look what they did for us today. This is fantastic." So I've repeatedly discussed how we want to reduce stress and improve welfare, and these go hand in hand, and they are definitely, without a doubt, our biggest focus. Just about every reason we train has a connection to welfare. Everything we do at the zoo with those animals has a connection to welfare. If I were to say a handful of other reasons, 5 other things why we train, and these aren't in any order other than maybe in order of how they get accomplished. But it has nothing to do with importance. It mostly has to do with accomplishing, but for ease of accomplishment. That'd be freedom, husbandry, medical, emergency, or enrichment and education. Freedom. Freedom's a weird thing to say to a bunch of zoo animals. They are as far from being free as they could be, probably. But by freedom, the better trained an animal is, the more freedom it has, in that if I'm treating an animal for whatever reason, and it's well trained and has a good foundation, I know that I can let it out on the exhibit, it can be with its herd mates, and when it's time for another round of injections, oral meds, whatever, I can call it back in, I can separate it from the group, and that's it. If I was in a position where the animal wasn't trained, then it's got to live maybe in a small box or in a crate or in a restraint chute or something. So the better trained it is, the more freedom a zoo animal has, any animal has. Shifting and recall, I talked about shifting for a lot of reasons already, and I talked about one recall, and we'll talk about another one in a little bit. But believe it or not, our reptile people train their Galapagos tortoise. We have several of them, and we're in the process of starting a new Galapagos exhibit. We do a ton. Every animal at the zoo, 97% of the animals in our collection are tied directly to a conservation effort that we do in the wild or even locally in Texas. And we have a huge relationship with the tortoises and the people in Galapagos, and we're starting to build a new exhibit here next year with Galapagos, and we're going to increase the group of tortoises. But these are big tortoises. Each of these tortoises weighs well over 100 pounds. So when we get those cold spells at night, which doesn't happen a lot in Houston, thank goodness, they're not just picking them up and moving them into their shelters. The herp team gets mad at me when I say, well, if tortoises were smarter, they'd go in. If they were an elephant, they'd know better. In their defense, what happens is they walk across the yard, the temperature starts to drop, they start to chill, they move slower, they turn around, I don't know if they really turn around, they look at their house and be like, oh, it's so far away and I'm so cold, I can't do it. And they don't go back in, and they can get too cold. So the team knows that. They come out as the temperature starts to drop. Instead of trying to lift these up, because it takes several people, they've trained them. They target train them to move where they want. And granted, it can be a painful process watching a tortoise walk from 100 yards across an exhibit to get into a night shelter where it's got heat. But they're doing it, and they're doing it with a lot of motivation for a tortoise. It's very cool to see. So I talked about shifting, but we also do shifting for hygiene. We need to clean. We can't just let them stay in the same place all the time. And a lot of animals shift because they see a keeper coming in with a food bowl, or they know that when the cage rattles, something's going to happen. And we try to, while that's very helpful to start the process, we like to put it all on a cue so that we can reliably move animals from place to place. But we also do skin care for some animals. Rhinos get hosed down every day. Elephants get a scrub bath every day. Foot care on some animals. We do foot care on giraffe without having to sedate them, on all of our hoof stock actually, and it's a big deal. But some of these guys, they certainly get pampered. This is a 13,000-pound, 50-year-old male Asian elephant that lifts his foot so we can scrub his back leg and we scrub his head. And then on cue, he's going to lay down. And granted, he's 54 years old now. He's the second oldest elephant in North America. He moves pretty good for an old man. He lays down on cue so that we can scrub the top of his back. And all this helps to build our relationship. But when our guests see the bath, they think, oh, they're just getting the elephant clean. Getting an elephant clean is such a small part of this routine. It's the only time of day we see an elephant clean, because as soon as we let them go, the first thing they do is throw dirt on themselves. So it's the only time you get to see if they have bumps, bruises, scrapes, nicks, things like that. It helps to really build the foundation and relationship with us. It helps us to train in new people. It helps us to gauge their attitude because we do it first thing in the day. There's so much more to a bath than just getting clean. Giraffe are super cool, big animals, neat. But one of the issues with them often is foot problems. So we do foot radiographs on them regularly, but also instead of having to sedate them to do an extensive foot care and really carve up their feet and do a lot to them, on a regular basis, they come into the chute, they're given the cue, they put their foot on the box, that's the top left video, puts it on there, no problem, and then we're able to get in, pick, file, grind. We use electric grinders on them, and we do this on a regular basis. We do preventative maintenance so that we don't have to do big routines. We do a lot of cooperative feeding in herds and in groups of things where we try to get animals comfortable being next to each other. We have a tremendous group of chimps at the zoo. Judy'd be mad if I don't know, but I want to say we have 18, maybe 20 now. And they actually came from 4 different groups. And again, I'm a large mammal guy, and chimps are pretty big, but they're certainly not my cup of tea. I'm told that it's very challenging to introduce groups of chimps. Primates, is that true? Yeah, very challenging to introduce groups of chimps. And we put 4 different groups of chimps together very successfully. And a lot of it had to do with cooperative feeding. We start feeding, and chimps, great apes, can be, food can be the straw that broke the camel's back to start World War III in the chimp building. And so we started with a lot of cooperative feeding with an animal spaced well far apart and getting comfortable that it's okay that he's eating over there, you're good here, and we gradually get them closer and closer. Something I do know a little bit about are elephants, and male elephants in particular. We're one of the few zoos in the country that has an all-male group as well. So we have 3 young males here ranging in age from 5 to 14. But a lot of times males, they're going to push each other around and they compete a lot. And these guys have no problem working next to each other. We can even get them closer for things if we wanted to, but they're so comfortable being next to each other. And that didn't start, we didn't just start this way. We definitely spread out and bring these guys closer together. And you can tell by this video, they do not care at all what the elephant next to them is doing, getting, or happening. They care about what's going on right in front of them. And that's through a lot of hard work of that team in cooperative feeding. So weight management, exercise programs, scale training, things that we can do to monitor weight. A lot of animals in human care are overweight. We love them to death. So if we can exercise them, I showed the lions doing some things, but if we can scale train them and really know how much weight they're gaining, that helps with pregnancy. It helps for dosage of medication when we need to sedate or give animals medication. That's also very important. So this early on is a southern ground hornbill, and the top video is playing, and we're just luring it up onto the scale for the most part. But this is how we started to get weights on this bird. Very comfortable, on the scale. We can get a weight, and away you go. No big deal. Same bird, sometime later. And now it comes up, it gets a cue to go on the scale. She's a little dramatic here and how big this step is. It's maybe 1.5 inches, but you'll see that, oh my God. It's pretty big, but now stays long enough for us to get the weight. Such a calm, relaxed attitude from the bird, from the staff, and it makes our job so much easier. It makes our vets' job. Our vets love the fact that they know how much a bird weighs without having to go in there with a net or to chase it down into a corner and hand grab it, just so we can figure out what it weighs to give it to medicate it. So this lion, we do regular weights on our lions. Same intense lion we saw earlier. So she's on a scale. We try to get them on and off just to sometimes we get an average weight. But her intensity coming back on is pretty cool. Scale. And you see, this is the same lion we showed earlier doing the A to Bs and how she had the feet all over and was really kind of intense grabbing that meat, and how she's calmed down over time. And we've focused on other things. So the cooperative care, for this, I guess everything we train could be cooperative care, but I'm talking about maybe nursing on cue or presenting memories for milk collection, things that are out of the ordinary that we can train to enhance the care that we provide. I was about to say all the elephants, but now it's just several of the older ones because we have a bunch of younger elephants. But the older elephants are trained to trade, meaning if they find something in the yard that is what they would consider is out of the ordinary. So it's not a tree, that they chew on. It's not a box that they get as a treat. Sometimes they will, but if it's out of the ordinary, they bring it to us. And when we walk by the yard, sometimes you'll see an adult coming over holding something, and they stick it outside and they trade. So if plastic bags blow in the yard, if people throw stuff in the yard, if toys go in the yard, our adult elephant, or our big adult elephant, actually hoards them in a little pile because she doesn't want someone else to trade them in and get the goodies. And then she trades them in. The way the exhibit is now, we don't get a lot of that stuff happening, but it's a pretty cool behavior. Our old CEO used to love to tell this story, is one night she dismantled a light. It was a big kind of a plastic light, and it had a frame around it, and it had a cage around it to protect it from her. And the next day when we come in and we actually did a tour really early in the morning, and she comes over and she's got this piece of plastic. I'm like, oh, that's weird. What is this piece of plastic? And we pay her and we start to do the tour, and we let her go, and she goes and she gets another piece. And so she dismantled the light, kept it in a pile, and traded probably 10 pieces individually instead of just bringing us the whole light. So it's that kind of stuff that we train to. That's so much better than eating it and having the ramifications of that. A long, long time ago, this young fella trained a gorilla to, we hand-raised 6 gorillas at the Buffalo Zoo. And it got to the point where, like, why do we keep breeding these gorillas if she doesn't take care of them? And the ones that we have, socially, they're not, I don't want to say they're not right, but when we send them to other places, they're not reproducing. They're tough to get along with other animals. So we actually trained a female to take care of her baby. She wouldn't nurse it, but when she had these babies, she wanted nothing to do with them. First one she took care of for maybe a month, and then the next one it was a couple weeks, and then the last one it was just like, I don't want it. And so what we did is we started to reinforce her for being around it. And we took it, we hand raised it, and then gave it back to her. And she would take it, and the mother's name was Becky. We'd say, Becky, get your baby. And she'd pick it up like it was like the dirtiest diaper ever. And she'd put it on her back, and she'd go about her business. And when it was come time to feed, we'd call her over and tell her to get her baby. And she'd grab it, like her eyes would wince, and she'd hold it up to the bars, and it would suck from her bottle for us. And then she'd put it on her back and go about her business. And over time, the drama of giving us the baby got less. But nonetheless, we were very successful. And she never raised babies, but after about a week of getting them out of bottle and getting them solid, we could give them back to her, and each one was better. And the second baby, there was almost no drama. She said, yeah, I'll take it, no big deal. Yeah, I'll give it to you, no big deal. So that kind of cooperative care goes a long way. This elephant, the first baby she had, she rejected it. And this happened right before I came to Houston 13 years ago. She has since had 5 babies and is a super mom. But as the second baby was born, we said, oh my God, if she rejects this one, because hand-raised baby elephants in the North America generally don't survive. And we don't know what we're doing differently than what they do in range countries, but whatever, they get brittle bone disease, the milk we feed them doesn't do what they need, and they rarely live without milk from an elephant. So we trained her to present her mammary. And all we do is sometimes cue it with a target or just tell her, nurse. She lifts her foot forward and presents, and we can milk her if we needed to. And that's her newest baby coming over. Oh, she'd say, nurse? I'll come nurse. And that's all we did. And right from the time that second baby hit the ground, so baby elephants, when they get ready to start nursing after 8-10 hours, they start smacking their lips. And then you know you got to get going. And we told Shani to nurse, and she nursed. And that baby came smacking, found it, and we asked her once. And then she, like, okay, I can handle this. She became a great mom. So that kind of cooperative care went a long way. Asian elephants, I'm not going to get into African Asian elephants, but Asian elephants don't have the same size tusks that African elephants have. This is a young male. He's 10 now. He's 10 in this video. But anyways, because we have a group of males, and Asian elephants' tusks are kind of smaller in diameter, we trim them. We cut them back. And just like a limb on a tree, it's going to grow fatter before it grows longer. So we do that so when we put these boys together and they start pushing and scuffling like boys do, they hopefully don't break tusks. So we trim them. And this is an unsedated elephant, leaned in, standing there, being reinforced while we cut a tip of his trunk off, or his tusk off. I mean, you can tell by his eye, he's such a soft eye. He almost falls asleep while we're cutting his tusk. So this kind of cooperative care wouldn't be possible without sedation if we didn't have a strong, solid training foundation and a great relationship with these guys. So medical stuff. We talked about crate training already. We talked about getting animals ready to ship or other reasons to get them to and from the clinic or maybe out of the zoo, transport altogether. Do this calmly without any type of chemical induction. So that's very important for us. But we also want them to take medication without having to use a pole syringe or a dart gun or a blowgun. So every time we'd use a dart gun or a blowgun, you have to make sure that everything went in. And then if it didn't, man, how do you set that next dose to know that you're not going to overdose the animal and still get the right amount in? Sometimes we get trauma to the skin and the muscle from a dart gun or a blowgun, so we try to train animals to stand for injection. All the elephants, from the time they're 6 months old to the time they die, stand for injections. They don't care. I thought, when I moved to Houston, we used to give shots in the rump at the last place I worked at, and our vet said, well, let's do it in the back of the arm. And so we trained these to take a shot in the rump. I thought it was no big deal. I was very wrong. So now we train them to accept injections in all various locations, standing, laying down, front leg, back leg, inside of the leg, because in their mind, the location mattered very much. So this is something we also just started doing. So I was at a recent training workshop, and the person that was talked a lot about, choice and having animals. What if they could give themselves their own injections? What if they could, participate even more in their care? So I went back and thought, that'd be kind of cool. I wonder if it really matters. So this is a 14-year-old male elephant. And while male elephants are often a lot more confident than female elephants, they have a lot more testosterone and can be a lot more edgier than females can. So what we did is we got a pulse syringe, and we trained him in a matter of about probably 6 minutes total.
Yep.
To hold the pulse syringe, and he literally injected himself with his own vaccination. That was pretty cool. The hardest part, we did that, and then we go to the next one, and we had a harder time training our vets, who, when we're ready, they jabbed him, and the elephant was like, what was that for? Like, no, all you gotta do is stand there. They're gonna do it themselves. So I don't know if it makes a difference, but it sure was pretty cool for him to, in his mind, I would imagine, saying, this is probably gonna hurt a little bit. No big deal, let's do it. Let's get it over with. I mean, they stand for the injections, but sometimes they will tense when you do it. Their eyes wince sometimes. You think a 12,000-pound elephant getting a 16-gauge needle isn't going to matter, but they wince when it comes. And he was like, yeah, whatever, let's do this, get it over with. But we also train them to take oral meds. And the goal of this is to show an open mouth. So no matter what we put in, if we tell them to swallow, if it's an apple, if it's a banana, if it's medicine, if it's liquid, if it's pills, to swallow without tasting. This is a handful of pills. She just said swallow. This is a 5-year-old young male elephant that was actually being treated with a broken tusk. And there's his open mouth, and hey, you get an apple for that. And we've put piles of stuff that we are told tastes terrible, and it gets chalky when it's in their mouth. And the last thing we want them to do is to savor it. Elephants are notorious for, you give them something, and a little while later you ask them to open their mouth, and it's still in there. It's like a bit of honey. It's still lingering in their mouth. So to train these guys to show an open mouth, and we train very young. Like I said, this elephant's 5. She probably knew it since he was 2. And how eager they are. I mean, you give them an apple, whole apple, which they often chew. You say swallow, they swallow it and show you, it's open, give me another one. It's a really great behavior, because one of the challenges we have with elephants is a herpes virus, elephant endotheliotrophic herpes virus, that's deadly. And by the time we see clinical signs, they're usually dead within 8 hours. So we've created a relationship with Baylor. I'm not going to get too much in the weeds, but anyways, what it does is they bleed internally, they don't eat, they're very responsive, but they don't want food, they don't want anything. So how do you get medicine in them? So this is the main reason we train this. They cannot want to eat, it doesn't matter, they're going to come over and still swallow it because they're still very responsive. I don't think this needs explanation, the ultrasound, because we want to see if an animal is pregnant or not. So we also set animals up for success. This is a Red River hog, and all we do is we put a stool in there. That's a light plastic stool that she could push out of the way. But one of the challenges we had with her was wandering away. So all we did is put a visual barrier in. She walks in, the person up front is reinforcing underneath the bars here and there, and our vet goes in to get an ultrasound to see how pregnancy is progressing. And that is such a great attitude from that hog to just chill. Anyone that trains, probably the hardest thing to train an animal to do is to steady, to do nothing. Wait a second, you want me to stand here and just do nothing and you're gonna pay me for it? And to see them do that, and a giraffe. The pigs are smart. People don't think giraffes are that smart. I don't always argue with them, but you can see how great that this giraffe is standing to get an ultrasound. Little DeBrazos monkey getting an ultrasound to see how her pregnancy's coming. Cute little bugger. Eager for us to check on her baby. We have a bachelor group of gorillas and a family group, and this male has a heart condition. So he holds those little wooden pegs while there's a vet tech that's staring at that ultrasound machine, and you can actually see in this video, I think you can see his valves, his heart valves clacking. That's what that white line is, that's his heart. And they're ultrasounding his heart to make sure everything's cool with him. And he gets to eat with a baby spoon. So blood collection, just like giving pills and getting weights, this is all great, but animals are masters at hiding how they feel. So if we can get routine bloods, we know, and we have baseline, we know when they're starting to get sick, we know if they're pregnant and they're not showing it, we know all this stuff, and we can take better care of them. So I'm going to show this video first. This is it's one of my favorite videos. So after I got back from that workshop and we talked about animals injecting themselves, we went up and started talking about doing it with giraffe for different things. And we have a decent herd of giraffe. I think we have eight or nine now. And we always want to get blood on them, and we've tried different ways to do it. And they stand pretty good, but they always want to stand up, lift their head up after for that. And we've had success with several, but two that we didn't. And so then we said, well, what if we started letting them do this whole inject yourself thing, lean into it? Well, that would be great, but now you have to aim where they stick themselves. Granted, a giraffe jugular vein is bigger than my thumb, and it's pretty easy to hit, but it's still a challenge. But this is, honest to goodness, the first end of the first session. The goal is she needs to push her neck against this white PVC. And so we touch, we pay, we touch, we pay. And this is kind of where the light goes on. Hold on a second. I do what? To get what? I can do that. And that was the early on. And then now when we go to present, it's literally just like, yeah, this is cool. And she leans in all kind of cool. But when she did that on her own, it's like, oh, wow, she gets it. And so what we did is we took that and for other giraffes, and in his right hand, he has just a pen, and they put the pressure with the pen, and then we stick with the needle. And that sensation seemed to really help this giraffe accept getting an injection. So when we would do it without the pen, as soon as you can stand there all day long, you can pinch him, you can use your keys, you can use dull needles. When you broke the skin with an actual needle, his head came up. And we're on a platform, we're up on a catwalk, so we're done. Nothing else you can do. So by having them press against it really made us more successful. We have maned wolf. Now the posture on this wolf, his face, his ears, he's not terribly happy, but he put that foot through the bars on his own. This is his own, on cue. Yeah, okay, I'll stick it out, you can draw blood on me. And stays there, he's not pulling, he's not struggling, he's not fighting. He's being reinforced here and there for doing it. And it's a great way for us to get blood on our maned wolves. And we have this, at the time we had several of these maned wolves. So they're all out in the group together, and you could pull them out one at a time, up front one at a time, to have this success. And then just general medical care, everything else. This is just a cute little potus monkey who also has a heart condition. and we're just listening for murmurs and different things on his heart. And I think he used to have issues with fluid or something, so they listen.
Good job, Mojo.
We have specialists come in all the time to do things. These are looking at an old elephant that has starting to develop cataract and lens issues. Yes? Sure. It's a piece of PVC, yeah, a dowel. Yep. Yep, so he's actually, if you watch the video, he actually is putting the pressure into that pen. And he puts pretty hard pressure against it. And he's pressing so hard against that pen that when we break the skin with the needle, it's no big deal. Whoop. So the keeper there in his hand, he's not pressing. That giraffe's pressing against him, and then he takes his hand and sticks the needle in. And then once he breaks skin, obviously you see he doesn't need the pressure anymore. But it's that initial thing. For this giraffe, it just happened to work. Sure. Sorry I didn't catch you sooner. So this shows a lot about relationship. So we have the specialist come in to look at the eyes on the elephants, and he dilates them so that the pupil gets big, and he uses some cool tools to look at it. And he said, is there any way to make it dark in here? We literally made the barn pitch black. The light is the machine that you'll see in a second. That's all the light. And this elephant's leaned in. The relationship is so strong with this team that she's like, yeah, whatever. And it's so dilated because he dilated it. She's not really freaking out. We have specialists come to the zoo, and this is an animal specialist, a local person that she deals with animal chiropractic, acupuncture, rehabilitation, and exercise. And she asked if we could do this with an old tiger to get mobility in their back legs. This is early on, so this isn't really trained, but just the early process of luring this cat back and forth to get this mobility. And this was probably about a year ago. I should have asked for a more recent video, but now they can literally put it on, tell him, and he just kind of goes back and forth. But this is, again, not my, I don't know about the acupuncture and rehabilitation, but she thought walking in this posture would help him strengthen some of the joints and muscles around his hips. So emergency recall, I talked earlier about the recall in general. Emergency recall, probably one of the more important behaviors, also one of the more difficult things to train and to focus on. But what if, somebody fell into the lion moat? What if a tree limb came down on the gorilla pen and we had to get stuff out? So all these things to try to help us be more successful and more safer. We do train emergency recalls with some of the more, what we would consider the more dangerous animals, lions, big cats in general, great apes, stuff like that. So this is early on training, and what we did, so they already come to the recall sound, which again, I'm outside, I don't know if you hear it. But to test it, we threw enrichment stuff into the pool. It has meat and stuff in it, and to try to distract them. So the auditory sound didn't go out yet. This female is moving away from the male. But right about now, the audible sound goes off for these guys to recall. You see the cat from the top come down, the cat in the back goes inside. So we tested using new toys, full of meat, good stuff. The male, whose job is to protect the pride, really has to contemplate whether I want to leave the meatball. Who knows what's inside? I want to go inside. Okay, I'll go inside. And does it. And you know what? If it's an emergency, if somebody fell into that exhibit or something happened, that's really all the time we might need to at least try to intervene and do something to help. So this was taken just a month ago before I turned all this stuff in for the talk. Again, you don't hear the sound. Everyone's like, I guess you do hear the sound. But without a distraction, everybody comes in together. And what's cool about this is these lions, the 3 lionesses, the male's new to the group, and they don't always get along. And they certainly don't want everyone to come into the same holding stall, because once they come in, that's where they disperse. And that female, you saw her kind of look for a second, but still went in, even with that male right behind her, again, reinforcing how strong this behavior really is for them. So training animals, it's very enriching for them. Many of them look forward to it, there's no doubt about it. Training animals to exhibit natural behaviors on cue to enhance their welfare is great, but to educate guests and our VIP tours and things like that, to try to create that empathy and compassion for the animals is what kind of motivates a lot of our team. Yes, we want the welfare, yes, we do this, but our job in a zoo is really to connect, after we take care of the animals, is to connect with our guests, to try to create empathy and make at least one person care as much as we do about, half as much as we do about animals, and do something about them in the long run. So we're lucky to have a great relationship with a large sports complex right on the other side of town where the Houston Dynamo, the soccer team, plays. And we can, this is one of the only species we still do free contact with, and these are program animal cheetahs that we run at a soccer field. They're chasing a lure. And we bring high dollar donors out to this to watch and observe these guys stretch their legs, but there's no exhibit in the zoo, in our zoo, and no place where we could get an animal to, like a cheetah, to actually chase prey and run. Was that top speed? I don't know, but it was faster than it would run in the zoo, that's for sure. Everyone knows elephants travel great distances in the wild. And so what we do, because we're limited on space, is we train them early on to walk around cones. So this elephant is trained to walk around these cones, these orange cones, and then we can take the cones away and they keep going. So this elephant was pregnant. She's gaining weight more than she should. We walk them a lot, and all we do is we give her the cue to walk, and we go about our business, and she walks around the cones or around that area. And you can take the cones and we place them wherever we want, and then you can leave them or take them away. So now this elephant's the first one in one of her yards. You can see by the footprints that's in here, she's the only one that's been out here walking in this circle for a while. There's no staff there. This is on our closed circuit monitoring that we have at the zoo. She's given the cue to walk, and she walks for about 45 minutes. There's definitely areas of the yard as she gets farther away from where any reinforcement might be, where she might slow down, but you'll see as she makes the turn to the corner and starts to head for home, the pace picks up. Are there things we could do to make it more consistent? Absolutely. What we're really concerned about is that she has X amount of minutes of activity a day, because elephants by nature are pretty lazy. And when she's cooking a 300-ish pound baby in her, we want to make sure that she's in the best shape as she can. And there's where the pace picks up as she starts to turn towards home stretch. And then our guests just love to watch elephants train, and you can see the enthusiasm and eagerness of this young male. And that's our barn dog. So while I talked about behaviors in the open bar when we're training like blood and stuff, you'll see that we rarely use food reinforcers out here in the yard when we're doing this type of stuff. It's reinforcing enough for them to do it, apparently, because his compliance is phenomenal. All their compliance is phenomenal. So if we can't walk them around, we really need to do things to keep them active. Like I said, in the wild, an elephant might travel 15, 20 miles a day because they need to for food and water. These guys are pampered in a zoo. We bring everything to them. We even take care, we do foot care on them. We get pedicures on a regular basis. They get bathed every day. So anything we can do to stimulate their minds and body, and it's all through training that enhances their welfare. Some of this stuff, does it have a purpose? Yeah, they lift their feet so we can see them. They lay down so we could look at their bellies and do different things. Does something like a wave or what he's about to do here, sit on the rock, do anything for him? Absolutely not. Not as far as physical health, but mental health and And engagement, absolutely. So I think you get the idea. He's a good little boy. So making connections to the animal is ultimately what makes people more conscious and more concerned and more likely to actually do something about them, for them. So our zoo motto, the Houston Zoo motto, is see them, save them. And in the large mammal team, our interior motto is bringing people close enough to care. Yeah, it's great to read about them in a book. It's great to see them on TV. But when they're this close and you can smell them, you can realize how quietly an elephant walks. If I was talking to you, 9 times out of 10, you wouldn't even hear one walk right up behind you. They're so quiet. To touch one, to feel how wrinkly they are, to realize how hairy they really are, that experience is like no other. And we really want to bring people close enough to care. It's something that, most people never forget the first time or the last time they met a lot of wild animals, but especially an elephant. So, we get millions of visitors to the zoo. And we get a lot of repeat customers, but as animal caregivers, it's really our job to try to get that message across to them to, 1, want to come back, to 2, think about us when they're not at the zoo, think about elephants or zebra or giraffe when they're not at the zoo, and maybe do something about it when they go home. Be more conscious of what they do. We really want to lock in that experience and etch that memory in their mind. So, if I were to say, if I'm doing a tour, does anyone know how an elephant drinks? And I assume the answer would be either through their mouth or through their trunk. And of course you're right. Elephants do drink through their trunks, but it's not a straw, it's a spoon. Elephants can't suck something up and swallow it. They gotta suck it up, hold it for a second, and then blow it into their mouth. So these are things that we talk to guests about. An elephant can hold 2.5 gallons of water in their mouth. That's a half of a 5-gallon bucket in their trunk. So when guests see a tour comes back, she just filled 2.5 gallons of water into her nose and then blows it on cue. Kids think, that's really cool. That's cool that she can do that. Do you know that an elephant has over 100,000 muscles and ligaments in their trunk alone? Human body has 650 named muscles, 100,000 in just their nose. Pretty cool. They can pick up something as small as a blade of grass, something as big as me or bigger. Very cool. So while this isn't a blade of grass, you get the idea. And one of the things we do with them is we let them figure out, hey, here's the challenge. Here's 5 sticks. In order to gain reinforcement, why don't you bring those 5 sticks back to me? This little guy puts 4 of them in his mouth, and the 5th one he carries back. Perfect. Guests think it's cool. They throw the sticks in. He brings them back. He thinks we're doing it again. No, we're good. His mother, on the other hand, has a completely different technique. You throw her 5 or 6 sticks. She puts 1 in her mouth, and she puts 5 in her nose. Doesn't matter. End game's still the same. You bring me 5 sticks, you'll get reinforcement. We have an older elephant that brings 1 at a time, and it's a painful experience. Here's 1. The same elephant that actually traded all the parts of the light. But guests see that, that's really cool. They pick up stuff in different ways, and their trunk can do that as well. You know that elephants also breathe through their nose. Yes, they can breathe through their trunk, but they mainly breathe through their nose. If you constrict an elephant's nose, they could panic and not breathe. So most elephants breathe through their nose. What does it sound like? We can play a harmonica, put a harmonica on their nose, tell them to. Seems like a pretty basic deal. All he's doing is being reinforced for breathing. He's breathing on his nose. Kids and guests think it's the coolest thing ever. Different behavior, same idea. How about one long continuous breath for your birthday? Kids think that's cool. Elephants breathe out of their nose, not out of their mouth. That's neat. You know what? If it's someone's birthday, we bring them up, wish them a happy birthday, give them a balloon. You can race this elephant. Who can blow it up the fastest? I'll even give you a head start because you can use your mouth, but he's only going to use his nose. On the count of 3, 1, 2, 3. Kid starts to blow. Tucker blows. Gets a balloon, walks away. Every time this family sees a balloon, they're going to think about this elephant, which happens to be Tucker. They're going to think about how cool it was that they got a balloon. They might not think how cool it was that it was full of snot, but it's cool that they got a balloon blown up by an elephant. They're going to, hey, do you know how much water an elephant blows out of its trunk? Do you know that they only breathe out of their nose? Oh, this is Tucker. It's no longer an elephant in a magazine. It's no longer something they see on TV. If they do see an elephant on TV, they think about Tucker or whatever elephant it was that day. So making that connection through training is such a powerful tool for us to make our job easier at engaging people. So we want to touch the hearts to teach the mind. We don't want to ramble on with facts and just throw data at them. That's important, but if we can weave it in to something cool that they remember, it's going to go a lot further. We want them, as much as I want them to remember, I want them to care. I want to touch the heart to teach the mind. Jeff Swanigan was the director at the Columbus Zoo for a long time, and that was his slogan. So we bring people close enough to care, but once we have them, we want to touch the heart to teach the mind. You can tug at their heart, and they're going to remember. They're going to remember that balloon full of snot and how much an elephant drinks and how much they can lift and how dexterous their trunk is. They're going to remember all that stuff. And that's what we really want to get across. So training does so much. It enhances the lives of our animals. It increases their welfare. It reduces stress, hopefully. It makes their lives better. We're putting them in a zoo. We're putting them in human care, but we're doing so much to enhance their lives in human care. So training all around makes our job easier. It just seems like a complete win-win. So that's what I have to say to you. If anyone has any questions, feel free to holler. But I appreciate so much you guys coming and listening to me share the experiences we have at the Houston Zoo and the training stuff we have here. So thank you.